How long could you survive in a medieval village? It sounds simple until you're actually there. No instructions, no help, just you and whatever the day throws at you. Most people wouldn't make it far. Let's see how you do. First up, food. Hope you're not hungry because this won't help. The average medieval peasant survived mainly on bread, but not the fluffy, sliced stuff from the store. This was dense, sour bread made from rye or barley that could break your teeth if you weren't careful. Kind of like that fruit cake your aunt brings every Christmas that nobody actually eats. Most villages shared a single oven because building and maintaining one was expensive. Imagine waiting in line with your neighbors just to bake your daily bread. And if the village baker didn't like you, well, you might end up with the burnt loaf. Meat was a luxury most peasants rarely enjoyed. You might get pork or salted fish a few times a year, usually during festivals or special occasions. For many, eating meat might happen only 5 or 6 times annually. The rest of the year, hope you like vegetables. Speaking of vegetables, your daily meals consisted mainly of beans, onions, leeks, turnips, and cabbages. Fruit was strictly seasonal. Apples, berries, and whatever grew locally appeared for a short time and then vanished until next year. Many fruits were dried to preserve them, turning them into hard, leathery versions of their former selves. Instead of water, most people drank ale. Yes, even children. This wasn't because medieval folks loved partying, but because ale was often safer than water. The brewing process killed many harmful bacteria. The ale was weak, about 1 to 2% alcohol, but still, imagine sending your kids to school with a pint instead of a juice box. Speaking of fasting, did you know medieval Christians observed over 100 fast days per year? That's nearly 1/3 of the year with no meat or dairy products allowed. The original intermittent fasting trend, except it wasn't for beach bodies, it was for your eternal soul. Famines struck frequently and without warning. One bad harvest could mean starvation for an entire village. During the worst food shortages, people resorted to eating tree bark, grass, and even boiled leather. Records from the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 show that nearly 10% of Europe's population died from starvation. Your success at finding food determined how long you'd survive. Most peasants lived on approximately 1,500 to 2,000 calories daily, less than recommended today despite doing heavy physical labor. Those calories came primarily from bread and ale, with seasonal additions of vegetables. Of course, finding food was only half the battle. Even with a full belly, you'd face another essential challenge every single day. Staying warm in a medieval village wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. Without central heating, insulation, or even proper chimneys, the cold months brought a special kind of misery that modern humans rarely experience. Firewood served as the primary heat source, but gathering it required constant work. A typical family needed about 10 to 15 cords of wood to survive a winter. That's a pile roughly 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 120 feet long. Collecting this massive amount meant working throughout the year, not just when it got cold. Women and children often spent entire days gathering fallen branches, while men chopped larger logs when they weren't working in the fields. Taking wood from the Lord's forest was strictly forbidden and harshly punished. Many lords employed foresters specifically to catch wood thieves. Punishments ranged from fines to public flogging. Getting caught stealing firewood was the medieval equivalent of stealing your neighbor's Wi-Fi, except instead of an awkward conversation, you might lose a hand. Court records from medieval England show that wood theft was among the most common crimes prosecuted in manorial courts. Alternative fuels included peat, decayed vegetation cut from bogs, dried dung, especially in areas with few trees, and straw or other agricultural leftovers. These burned faster than wood and often produced more smoke and less heat, but when wood was scarce, anything combustible would do. Most homes lacked proper chimneys until the late medieval period. Early medieval houses had a simple hole in the roof called a louvre that allowed some smoke to escape. The result? Homes filled with eye-watering smoke that gradually found its way out. This smoky environment caused chronic respiratory problems and eye irritation. Medieval skeletons often show evidence of carbon deposits in the lungs, clear evidence of lifetime exposure to smoky living conditions. Sleeping arrangements were designed for warmth rather than privacy. Entire families often shared a single bed near the fire. Body heat was valuable currency on cold nights. The concept of personal space wasn't invented until central heating came along. Beds themselves were usually simple wooden frames with rope or leather strips creating a springy surface, topped with a straw-filled mattress. Blankets were wool or fur if you were lucky, and people slept in their clothes for added warmth. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my fiancée got me one, and I have to say, I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels, and what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike, while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It's currently only $60, and it's clear. This one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera or clicking the first link in the description of this video. Open hearths were terribly inefficient. Situated in the center of the room, these uncovered fires lost most of their heat straight up through the roof hole. The design meant that the middle of the house might be unbearably hot, while corners just a few feet away remained freezing. Heat distribution was so poor that frost could form on interior walls during particularly cold nights, even with a fire burning. Animal heat became a practical solution during the coldest months. Cows, pigs, goats, and chickens often lived inside the house during winter. Their body heat helped warm the space, while the humans provided protection from wolves and thieves. The downside? The smell and mess of livestock living alongside you. Archaeologists have found that many medieval homes had a slightly lower floor level on one side, specifically designed for animals and their waste. Your clothing served as your personal insulation system. Most peasants owned just 1 or 2 outfits made primarily of wool. During winter, these clothes were layered and sometimes never removed for months at a time. The concept of pajamas didn't exist. You simply slept in your clothes. Wool was the material of choice because it retains heat even when damp, crucial in the humid, often leaky houses of medieval villages. Heating technology advanced slightly by the late medieval period. Some homes developed central hearths with clay hoods that directed smoke toward the roof hole more efficiently. Wealthier peasants might have simple stone chimneys by the 1400s, though these remained rare in most villages. The true revolution in home heating, the cast iron stove, wouldn't arrive until centuries later. Winter activities were planned around heat conservation. Families gathered in the single heated room, performing indoor tasks like repairing tools, spinning wool, or weaving. Work requiring fine detail often had to wait for warmer months when fingers weren't numb with cold. In the depths of winter, people often went to bed shortly after sunset, not just to save expensive candles, but to huddle together for warmth during the longest, coldest hours. Cold-related deaths were common, especially among the elderly and very young. Historical records show that winter mortality rates increased by 25 to 30% in medieval Europe. Hypothermia, combined with malnutrition and illness, claimed countless lives each winter. If you're used to adjusting your thermostat when you feel a chill, the medieval heating situation would be a harsh adjustment. Your survival through winter would depend entirely on your preparation during warmer months and your ability to endure discomfort. But even with food in your belly and warmth in your bones, you need somewhere to rest your head at night. Home sweet home in medieval times? Not exactly. The average peasant home measured around 400 to 600 square feet, about the size of a modern 2-car garage. Now imagine fitting your entire family plus some animals into that space. Most peasant dwellings were simple one-room structures with walls made of wattle and daub, a construction method using woven sticks covered with a mixture of clay, sand, animal dung, and straw. It's like building your house out of mud pies, except adults did it and called it architecture. The roof over your head would be made of thatch, dried vegetation like straw, reeds, or heather bundled together and layered thickly. A well-made thatch roof could last about 20 years, but it required regular maintenance. Thatch also made an excellent home for mice, rats, birds, and insects that would drop down on you at night. Talk about roommates you never asked for. Your floor? Packed earth, perhaps covered with rushes or straw that was changed rarely, if ever. These floor coverings accumulated dropped food, dirt, pet waste, and whatever else fell from above. Over time, this created a compost-like layer that historians have found could be up to 8 inches deep in some homes. Windows were rare in peasant homes, and when they existed, they were small openings covered with wooden shutters or oiled parchment. Glass was far too expensive for common folk. Most homes remained dark even during daylight hours, with the only natural light coming from the door when open or from the smoke hole in the roof. Privacy didn't exist in these one-room dwellings. Entire families, parents, children, grandparents, and sometimes unmarried relatives all lived, ate, and slept in the same space. Archaeological evidence suggests the average medieval household contained 6 to 8 people. Your medieval home doubled as your barn. Keeping animals inside served multiple purposes. It prevented theft, provided extra warmth during winter, and made milking and feeding more convenient. The original farm-to-table experience meant the farm was literally at your table. Waste disposal was primitive at best. Chamber pots collected human waste, which was then emptied outside, often in the same places where people drew water. Some villages had communal waste trenches, but many simply allowed waste to accumulate around homes. Most shocking to modern sensibilities would be the smoke-filled interior. Without proper chimneys, smoke from cooking and heating fires filled the upper portion of the house before gradually escaping through the roof hole. Living in perpetual smoke caused eye and lung problems for inhabitants. Between the cramped quarters, smoky air, and waste management issues, your living conditions would create challenges that went far beyond mere discomfort. Forget everything you know about daily showers, deodorant, and minty fresh breath. Medieval hygiene would shock even the most relaxed modern standards. If you're the type who feels gross after skipping one shower, medieval cleanliness practices would be your personal nightmare. Bathing was rare, very rare. Most peasants took a proper, full-body bath only once or twice a year, typically before major religious holidays like Easter or Christmas. If time travel ever becomes possible, bring nose plugs. Lots of nose plugs. When bathing did occur, it was a major production. Water had to be carried from wells or streams, then heated over a fire, a process that could take hours. Entire families often shared the same bathwater, starting with the father, then mother, then children, in descending age order. By the time the youngest child bathed, the water was cold and filthy. Soap, when available, was harsh and uncomfortable. Made from animal fat mixed with lye, a caustic substance derived from wood ash, it irritated skin and eyes. Gentler soaps made with olive oil existed, but were expensive luxuries for the wealthy. Between baths, spot cleaning was the norm. Faces and hands might be washed daily using water from a basin. The rest of the body remained unwashed for months. People used perfume sachets, herbs stuffed in clothing, or scented oils to mask body odor. Lice, fleas, and bed bugs were universal companions. Everyone had them, rich and poor alike. Removing these pests was a social activity. Family members would pick lice from each other's hair and clothing, often while chatting or telling stories. Medieval Netflix and chill was basically, pick bugs off me while I tell you about my day. Dental hygiene barely existed. People occasionally cleaned their teeth using twigs, rough cloth, or their fingers. Some used abrasive mixtures made from crushed shells or ashes to scrub their teeth. Many never cleaned their teeth at all. By age 40, many people had few, if any, teeth remaining. Most villages lacked proper sewage systems. Human waste was typically dumped into streets, ditches, or rivers. Often the same rivers used for drinking water downstream. Water for drinking and cooking came from wells, springs, or rivers. This water was often contaminated with human and animal waste, leading to widespread waterborne diseases. Your clothes rarely got washed. Most peasants owned just 1 or 2 outfits worn continuously until they literally fell apart. Washing clothes required significant labor, so clothes were washed as infrequently as possible to make them last longer. With such limited hygiene practices, your body would become a breeding ground for bacteria and parasites. Any small cut or scrape could quickly turn serious, which brings us to another critical factor that would determine your survival chances. If you think today's healthcare system is frustrating, medieval medicine would give you a whole new perspective. Getting sick or injured in medieval times often meant facing treatments that were not just ineffective, but actively harmful. Modern hospitals might keep you waiting for hours, but at least the doctor won't try to balance your humors by draining your blood. The foundation of medieval medicine was the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These substances supposedly needed to remain in balance for good health. Any illness indicated an imbalance requiring correction. Bloodletting ranked as the most common treatment for countless ailments, from fever to epilepsy. A physician or a barber surgeon would cut open a vein and drain blood into a bowl, sometimes removing up to 80 ounces. That's 5 pints, or about half the blood in an adult body. Leeches served as a popular bloodletting alternative, especially for areas difficult to reach with knives. These blood-sucking worms were applied to the skin, where they attached and drank blood until becoming engorged. Talk about a job that sucked the life out of you. Wounds received treatments based on availability rather than effectiveness. Wine, vinegar, honey, and even spider webs were applied to injuries. More serious wounds were cauterized with red-hot irons to stop bleeding, causing excruciating pain and significant scarring. Surgery occurred without anesthesia or proper sanitation. Patients were held down by assistants or given alcohol to dull their senses. Surgeons worked quickly, prioritizing speed over precision. A skilled surgeon could amputate a limb in under a minute, a necessity when the patient was fully conscious and screaming. Childbirth was extremely dangerous, with maternal mortality rates reaching 1 to 2% per birth. The average woman gave birth 6 to 7 times during her life, meaning many women eventually died from pregnancy-related complications. Specific diseases ravaged medieval populations regularly. The Black Death, or the bubonic plague, killed an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population in the mid-14th century. Survivors of the initial outbreak faced recurrent plague epidemics for generations afterward. Even common conditions like appendicitis, strep throat, or infected cuts were frequently fatal without antibiotics. A simple cut while working in the fields could develop into a systemic infection that kills within days. Life expectancy averaged around 30 to 35 years, though this number is somewhat misleading. High infant and childhood mortality dramatically lowered the average. If you survived to adulthood, you might reasonably expect to reach your 50s or 60s, still decades shorter than modern lifespans. But even with good health, surviving alone in medieval times was nearly impossible. Your life would be deeply intertwined with others in ways that modern individualists might find suffocating, but were absolutely essential back then. Medieval villages weren't just collections of houses. They were tightly knit survival networks where cooperation meant life and isolation often meant death. Your survival depended not just on your own skills, but on your place within this intricate social web. Village life operated on collective labor. Major tasks like harvesting, haymaking, and barn raising required everyone's participation. These weren't optional community events. They were mandatory survival activities. It was the original team-building exercise, except failure meant starvation rather than awkward office parties. Resources and tools were commonly shared. Few families owned everything needed for survival, so complex borrowing networks developed. Your village might have one plow shared among 10 families, a communal oven for bread baking, and a single bull that serviced all the cows. Refusing to participate in communal work or share resources could result in severe consequences. Village courts imposed fines on those who didn't contribute fairly. In extreme cases, uncooperative villagers faced exclusion from common lands, social ostracism, or even expulsion from the village. Every person had a designated role based on age, gender, and skill. Men typically handled plowing, building, and heavy field work. Women managed households, gardens, dairy animals, and textiles while also helping with harvests. Children watched younger siblings, scared birds from fields, collected firewood, or tended animals. Being a loner wasn't just unusual, it was suspicious. People who kept to themselves often faced accusations of witchcraft or dealings with evil spirits. In a world where survival required cooperation, those who didn't participate fully became objects of fear and distrust. Major life events became community affairs. Weddings, funerals, and childbirths involved the entire village in various supporting roles. These weren't just social niceties, but practical survival mechanisms that ensured no family faced crisis alone. Gossip served as both social control and information network. News, warnings, and judgments spread rapidly through well-established channels. Your reputation, determined by your work ethic, generosity, and conformity to social norms, directly affected your access to help in times of need. Marriage arrangements reflected community priorities rather than individual choice. Matches often aimed to consolidate landholdings, connect useful skills, or strengthen family alliances. Love was considered a nice bonus if it developed, but practical concerns came first. Your survival in a medieval village would depend heavily on your ability to integrate into this complex social system. Modern individualism would be not just unwelcome, but potentially dangerous to community cohesion, and disasters did strike regularly, which brings us to our final consideration. When it comes to protection in medieval times, forget about calling 911 or installing a security system. Villages existed in a world of constant threats, with defenses so basic they'd make modern insurance agents faint. Your survival depended on understanding a simple truth. Safety came from numbers, not locks or walls. Most villages had no fortifications whatsoever. Archaeological surveys of medieval village sites show that less than 10% had any form of purposeful defensive features. It's like having your front door permanently wide open while posting your daily schedule online for anyone to see. Bandit attacks represented a persistent danger, especially in remote areas or during times of war. Groups of outlaws, deserters from armies, or simply desperate people formed bands that targeted isolated settlements. Historical court records describe raids where entire villages lost their livestock, food stores, and valuables in a single night. Weapons for peasants were severely limited by law and economics. Most medieval kingdoms prohibited peasants from owning swords, bows, or armor. These were reserved for nobles and professional soldiers. Your defensive weapons would be the same tools you use daily: pitchforks, axes, sickles, and staffs. The feudal contract theoretically obligated lords to protect their peasants in exchange for labor and taxes. In practice, this protection varied widely depending on the lord's character, resources, and proximity. Some lords maintained armed household guards who could respond to village raids, while others lived far from their holdings and offered little practical protection. Some villages developed warning systems to provide at least some advance notice of danger. Designated lookouts might watch from church towers or nearby hills. Bell systems communicated specific threats through different ringing patterns. One pattern for fire, another for raiders, and so on. Travel beyond your village boundaries carried significant risks. Roads connected settlements but passed through forests and uninhabited areas where ambush was common. Most people traveled in groups when possible, even for short journeys to neighboring villages. Night brought particular vulnerability. Without effective lighting, darkness provided perfect cover for thieves and attackers. Most villages observed strict curfews, not as parental rules, but as survival strategies. After dark, doors were barred, animals brought inside, and movement within the village minimized. Within the village itself, punishments for crime served as both justice and deterrent. Public humiliation devices like stocks and pillory stood prominently in village centers. Medieval justice was less about rehabilitation and more about making sure everyone saw what happened when you stole your neighbor's chicken. Children received special protection training from an early age. They learned hiding places, escape routes, and meeting points in case of attack. Children's games often doubled as practice for emergency situations. Hide and seek had very practical applications in a world where hiding effectively could save your life. Spiritual protection felt as important as physical safety to medieval minds. Church bells were believed to ward off demons and destructive storms. Religious symbols marked village boundaries, supposedly creating spiritual barriers against evil. During times of danger, villages conducted special prayers, processions, or rituals believed to invoke divine protection. So, how long would you survive in a medieval village? The answer depends not just on your physical stamina or practical skills, but on your ability to adapt to a world defined by interdependence, hardship, and constant uncertainty. The modern tendency toward individualism, privacy, and personal comfort would need to give way to community priorities, public living, and endurance of discomfort.